Oh, George. Well, where are you? You're lost, but you can't be. Why, anyone can find their way around in this city. Well, now, what corner are you on now? Right. Well, now, it's easy from there. Just come along Main to the square, then 3 blocks right, and 1 right again, and you'll be right here. Got it? Right. I'll see you in 10 minutes then. I'll be waiting for you. Fine. Goodbye. Poor old George. He couldn't find his way around his own backyard by himself. And I guess there are lots of folks like that, you know, when you come to think of it. Even when the road is all mapped out for them, they still seem to get lost. By the way, have you ever thought of how many roads there really are in the world today? One must calculate in terms of millions of miles of concrete and asphalt when one considers the highways of the world. Have you thought of how difficult it must have been to get around before there were roads to follow? But perhaps that is a rather foolish question, for it is hard for us to imagine a time when there were no roads at all. For mankind has always made roads with his restless feet. In every land men's feet have walked in the busy market, in the lonely wilderness, now seeking adventure, then after gold. The explorer, the merchant, and the missionary all have made roads for us to follow. Of course, our ideas of a road may change. When we were young, we thought this was the ideal. And it would do many of us good to find time to think so again. Later, when we were a little older, we preferred this. Though for some reason we never noticed the roughness of the roads as we jogged along. While today, in a more modern setting with a little more breeze and speed, youth still instinctively makes for the side roads. Well, to come back to our main theme, we're apt to forget that, like Rome, roads were not built in a day. And speaking of Rome, did you know that some of the oldest roads today were built by the Roman Empire? It is possible in some parts of Europe, for example, to walk on the very road along which the Roman chariots hurried at the bidding of their imperial masters. The wheels of speeding cars travel along the great North Road of England, once a Roman road, now a superhighway. It was along the Appian Way outside the city of Rome in Italy that the Apostle Paul was led as a prisoner. Little did Rome think then that Paul would send the message of Christianity to all parts of the world, and by the aid of thousands of miles of Roman roads. The engineering skill and hard work of the men of that day made it possible to go from England to India on roads so well built that they are standing in part today. Of course, there were other famous roads with which Rome had nothing to do. Many of them were originally trade routes by which the merchants carried their wares to the markets. 2 of these were the amber roads, leading across Europe from the north to the Mediterranean ports. Another was the lapis lazuli road. Along it these semi-precious stones were brought from Afghanistan, through Persia, and the passes of the Taurus Mountains in Asia Minor to Italy. I think, though, that perhaps the greatest of all was the Silk Road, by which it was possible even in the Middle Ages to travel from Italy to China and from Venice to Peking, to carry the precious silk cloth obtainable only in China. The loaded camel trains wound across Mongolia and Turkestan over the roof of the world till the Caspian and the Black Sea were left behind, and a sunny Mediterranean harbor welcomed the weary travelers. Now in America, too, there were historic roads. The Road of the Incas dates from the year 900 and is one of the engineering wonders of the world. From near the site of Quito in Ecuador, it wound southward from almost 3,000 miles along the slopes of the Andes Mountains to terminate under their shadow in central Chile. In North America, the settlers traveled as much by water as by land. You can follow their trail today from Montreal in Canada up the Ottawa River and by portage across Ontario's lakes and into Lake Michigan. Other portages linked these waters with the mighty Mississippi, down which the voyagers sped till they reached its mouth at New Orleans. By this vast inland waterway, the 2 sections of New France were linked together. On this continent, roads played a great part in opening up America. One you may follow is the great national pike from Maryland to Illinois. It opened the West to settlement and was once the chief avenue from westward migration. Today, one of the chief features of the North American way of life is just what you see our friends doing. Their cares are behind them, and ahead lies the open road. Where will they go? Well, never before has there been such an amazing variety of places to see and roads to take. Shall it be US 1, beginning in the hunting and fishing paradise of northern Maine and ending on the sunny beaches of Florida's southern island tip? Or shall it be the Trans-Canada Highway, now nearly completed from Atlantic to Pacific? More adventurous voyagers will leave these well-traveled scenes and head far northward, perhaps over the Alaska Highway, through the gold-embedded lands of the Yukon and beyond. Yes, and now there are flyways as well as highways. North America is growing wings and looking at herself from the air. Well, all this may sound interesting, but we must not forget that there are roads which are neither on land nor sea. There are pathways for the mind as well as for the feet. It was the Greeks who laid the foundations of the mental paths we chiefly follow, such men as Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato. Through the centuries, their thoughts have been followed at the great universities of the world. And yet, important as these pathways are to us, there are ones more vital by far than they. There are the pathways of the Spirit. There are the roads that lead to happiness, not only here, but also hereafter. There are also the devious bypaths which lead to sorrow and despair. And there are dead-end roads. How careful we must be to choose the road with an eye to the end to which it leads. Jesus told us that it was easier to get onto a dead-end street than onto a highway. The gate is wide, and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter it are many, said he. And on the other hand, the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. And how wrong and dangerous is the age-old philosophy that every man travels a road that leads to weariness, boredom, and death, and that the wise man will snatch what pleasures he can as he journeys. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. It is said that there are more suicides in those cities of the world where every street ends at the water's edge. It is reckoned that 1/3 of the cases which come to one of the great psychologists are suffering, as he writes, from no clinically definable neurosis, but from the senselessness and emptiness of their lives. In such a day of byroads, detours, and dead-end roads, we need authoritative guidance. And all of this is given in this divine roadmap I am holding, the Bible. Let me show you some of the pathways of the Spirit. Here is how the prophet Isaiah speaks. He says that there is a spiritual highway which leads to happiness. And a highway shall be there, and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. Now this is the through way, the super highway to joy and peace. But like every through way, the way of holiness crosses the lesser roads by which the unwary are led astray. Even then, a spiritual cloverleaf is provided, so that from each of these the way is open to fullness of life. I wonder if you have found yourself on any of these byroads. There is the way of the transgressor, and we are told it is hard. Some have reached this by another bypath, the way of selfishness. The Bible says, there is a way that seemeth right unto man, but the end thereof is death. Some find themselves on the way of Cain. Jealousy becomes the master of their undoing. Such bypaths lead into the way of destruction. But only the highway of holiness can lead to the holy city at last. Perhaps you ask how you may leave the byway you have followed and reach the highway. Well, here is the answer. For Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. St. Mark tells us in his gospel that the voice of one was heard crying in the desert, Prepare ye the way of the Lord, make his path straight. John the Baptist prepared the way, and Jesus Christ came walking up the new highway of grace. At Calvary, it seemed as though this too was a dead-end street, for the rough timbers of a cross seemed to block the way. But an empty tomb and a risen, living Christ opened up the highway of holiness in life and heaven hereafter, and millions have walked on it, and still walk its pleasant way, following Him, the pioneer of true faith and giver of eternal life. Oh, excuse me. Hello? Yes? George? Well, where are you now? But George, I told you plainly. I see you took a shortcut. So where are you now? Well, now look, you'd better stay right there, and I'll come and get you. Right? Goodbye. Poor old George. I might have known. He just couldn't resist a shortcut. And you know, some people keep looking for one on their way to heaven too. George needs someone sitting right beside him to tell him every turn. And do you know that God's care of those who love Him is just as certain? We are told that our ears shall hear a word behind us saying, "This is the way, walk ye in it, when ye turn to the right hand, and when ye turn to the left." My friend, are your feet directed in the way everlasting? If not, hear and heed the Master's call, and pray, oh, for a humbler walk with God. Lord, bend this stubborn heart of mine, subdue each rising rebel thought, and all my will conform to Thine. Oh, for a nearer walk with God. Lord, turn my wandering heart to Thee. Help me to live by faith in Him who lived and died and rose for me. And now, friends, once again, the Salvation Army sends its three-word benediction to all men everywhere. God bless you. We hope that you will join us again soon, when together we will seek to learn more of Him who is in very truth the living Word.